Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar. My name is Mark Gatos. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Enlight Software. We want to thank you for the time you're going to be spending with us today. We're starting right on time. The Apple clock on the wall says 9 o'clock Pacific time. So we're going to begin the webinar here. A couple housekeeping things. First off, this is being recorded, so if you would like to receive, we'll be sending out the link after the webinar is completed. We'll send you the link so you can listen to it again if you need to, or share it with others. The second thing is, if you have any questions, feel free to submit them. We will try to get to everyone's questions at the end. We tend to hold a pretty short, pretty crisp webinar. We try to keep it within 30 minutes, so we may not be able to get to all questions, but we will answer all questions either during the webinar or offline. So if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them, and we'll try to get to all of them at the end. But like I said, we will get to them either online or offline. So again, thanks for joining us. And without further ado, let's sort of begin the webinar. So let me just move that. So a quick agenda. For those that aren't familiar with Enlight, I'm going to give an introduction to who Enlight is, what we do as a software company. Then we're going to talk a little bit about what is referred to as data center infrastructure management, DCIM versus ITSM. Then we'll talk specifically about the data center gap with ServiceNow. ServiceNow has quite a few applications. We'll talk a little bit about that, but they don't reach all the way down into the data center, and we'll talk about why that matters and what specifically we do and how we complement ServiceNow. And then we'll talk about things to consider, and as I mentioned before, we will get to the Q&A. So let's jump into it. So Enlight Software is a company who's dedicated to helping really automate the ongoing management of what we consider data center infrastructure, and we call this data center service management, where you're not just managing infrastructure, you're actually managing the service that the data center delivers, and then making sure you're hitting your SLAs, making sure that you're taking care of the business and delivering the service that is required, which really is compute capacity, storage capacity, network capacity, making sure that you're delivering that service to the business. So I put this quote in here because it's sort of near and dear to anybody who deals with ITIL. In the world of ITSM, obviously it's about creating repeatable processes, measuring those processes, and then improving those processes. But as the quote says, measurement is the first step that leads to control and eventually to improvement. If you can't measure something, you can't understand it. If you can't understand it, you can't control it. And if you can't control it, you cannot improve it. And a lot of this presentation has to do with improving the processes within your data center, but you need to have transparency, you need to make them repeatable, and you need to be able to measure those particular processes. So anyone who's been in a data center recognizes that managing a modern data center can be very challenging, and ultimately that information has to be seamlessly integrated into the ITSM systems of an organization. If you think about inside a data center, you've got resources and assets and people and processes and policies and things going on, and there are actually quite a few moving parts. And you know, as people say, oh, well, isn't that all in the cloud? Well, there aren't magical clouds that give us our compute capacity. You still have to have servers that are being managed. They're either being managed by an organization or they're being managed in a co-location facility, or even a cloud provider has to be managing those resources. But ultimately, there are a lot of moving parts within a data center. And this is where Enlight comes in. We sell software. We are a software organization, and we help do what is referred to as data center service management. We sort of break this into sort of three different buckets. We help manage infrastructure, which is traditionally called data center infrastructure management. I always say that's managing stuff. It's managing things in the data center, right? And then the second thing is you get into managing the people and the processes occurring in the data center, right? It has to do with the different workflows, the things that are going on, the changes that are occurring, the tech refreshes that are occurring in the data center. You could be bringing in a new generation of storage into the organization. You have to migrate out the old, bring in the new. You've got stuff you're decommissioning while you're doing tech refreshes. So there are a lot of processes that are very specific to the data center that within our data center service management, we're sort of managing within workflows and policy management. And the third thing is really then taking that information and tying it into other systems. Tying it into ITSM systems, you may be tying into financial systems like some of our customers do. You could be tying into SAP, you could be tying into virtually anything that needs information about what's happening in the data center. So all three of these components combined create what we call data center service management. There's the DSIM element, data center infrastructure management. There's managing the workflows and the people and the policies. And then there's the tying in, managing sort of the tie-ins to different systems, whether those are business management or building management systems, or it's ITSM, or it's financial systems, or virtually any types of systems, again, that are dependent on the data center. So these three things together make up DCSM, or what we refer to as data center service management. So here are just some screenshots for folks that are not familiar with the types of things. Sometimes people have a difficulty getting their head around it. And so a picture is worth 1,000 words. We just have a few example screenshots here that gives you the types of things that Nlyte manages, right? Whether it's racks, or it's power, or it's a floor plan, or the cabling, or the different areas of capacity management that we're specifically involved with. These are just sort of some of the screens that you'd find inside Nlyte. And one of our claims to fame is with Nlyte, we support the entire data center lifecycle, from when goods are received within the warehouse throughout the entire asset lifecycle, managing things like power monitoring and temperature monitoring and alarming, migrations and consolidations, cable management, audit and compliance, capacity management, through tech refresh, through the ultimate end of life of equipment at the decommission stage. So we support all the different life cycles, and in any given data center, all these life cycles tend to be occurring at the same time in any sort of significant data center. What you find is there are new goods coming in, while in the back end there may be equipment that's being decommissioned while you're maybe doing migration and consolidation of other data centers into a single data center, or you may be taking data rooms and migrating them into a data center, or you acquire a new company and you've got to absorb their data center. Ultimately, there are a lot of different moving parts, all at different stages. Our key within Nlyte is within a single system, we can help an organization manage, ultimately many different data centers. We have one large financial services company who, from a single instance of Nlyte, manages 45 different data centers worldwide. And the business benefits of this really are about reducing costs, and these costs tend to be in the form of you don't have phantom assets or zombie servers that aren't being used. You reduce the number of resources being used. So you're really optimizing things on the resource perspective, thus reducing costs. But you're also improving the personnel efficiency, because not only are you helping them by providing the most current information, but the system has the workflows and the policy management that helps them do their jobs more efficiently, tells them exactly where they need to put assets, or that tells them exactly where assets are, tells them where to put the assets, what systems to tie them into, what weight capacity is available in a given area, and some buildings have challenges with this. So it takes care of figuring all of that out for personnel. It also helps organizations be more agile, because when the default, when you don't have some type of solution to help manage the data center, people turn to spreadsheets, they turn to Visio drawings, and that information gets out of date very quickly. And when people go to perform a task in the data center and the information's not right, then they spend a great deal of time trying to figure out what is the correct information, where are these specific assets, where should they be tied in. And so we help organizations become more agile by providing, in essence, an automation that helps them do their jobs more efficiently. And then lastly, if an organization has to comply with certain policies or gets audited, ultimately Inlight can help with that entire audit process. And we've had customers tell us they've taken the audit process literally from weeks down to days because all of the information is accurate. And there's nothing worse than providing inaccurate information to auditors. It just makes them want to pry that much more. So these tend to be the business benefits folks see in using Inlight. So the real challenge is organizations have spent literally millions, if not tens of millions of dollars on ITSM solutions, but in many ways, the data center falls outside those processes. People just say, well, let the data center do what they want to do. And the data centers tend to be managing things in spreadsheets, like I said, spreadsheets, CAD drawings, Visio drawings. And so it isn't integrated seamlessly into ITSM. And many organizations are now starting to say, those processes, we need visibility, we need transparency, we need them to be part of the overall ITSM processes we have. And so let's sort of drop now into ServiceNow. This particular screen was taken right from the ServiceNow website. As you can see, they have a great number of different applications for a variety of different areas: customer service, IT, field service, finance. But I'm highlighted one here, which is facilities. Because often people will say, well, ServiceNow has a facilities solution. Does that not necessarily take care of managing the data center? Well, it's interesting because if you take a look here, you can see I pulled a screenshot from the actual software. And what ServiceNow's facilities management is very focused on is managing what many would call facilities. It would be the different office space, desks, chairs, other types of equipment that people use on a day-to-day basis, right? And obviously in a large organization, this is actually quite a task to manage all the issues of, Martha has an issue with her phone port, or Bob has an issue with his chair. There's quite a bit of moving parts in this field, but facilities means different things to different people, right? Facilities can mean, as the example in ServiceNow, desks and chairs and so forth. But what facilities means over on the data center is something very different. And so when we drop down a level, if you think about a data center is far more than just facilities, right? Yeah, facilities tends to manage things like physical security, power, cooling, but then you start getting into other areas such as servers, racks, power monitoring, temperature monitoring. You've got alarming, you've got data center reporting, you've got policies, cabling. As I mentioned before, there are a lot of moving parts inside a data center. And so a data center is more than just facilities, but even from a facilities perspective, it's very different than the facilities you find in the office, right? Dealing with desks and chairs and cubicles and everything that's within the facilities area. So Inlight is very focused on these specific areas, dealing with all the different elements that are occurring within the data center. So if we back up for a second and you look at it, at the IT operations management landscape, and this is not specific to ServiceNow, but they certainly have solutions in many of these areas. You have sort of at the highest level of stack, which is people have applications today for managing IT and the applications themselves, right? The service catalog, incident management, asset management, capacity management, security management, a lot of different things up here. I'm not even by any stretch of the imagination capturing all the different applications which exist at this layer. But then if you drop down, you also have applications to manage what we refer to as application infrastructure management, which is database management, storage management, configuration, networking, everything that's supporting the apps above. Well, below that, you get the data center. And this is where if an organization does not have some type of data center infrastructure management solution or data center service management solution, typically what they're doing is they're using spreadsheets. They're using very manual methods, while the rest of the stack above may be very automated, and folks are using a variety of different applications. At the level below, they're using things like spreadsheets, CAD drawings, cable diagrams, and as a result, they get inconsistent processes. You get power outages. I'm sure everyone on this call heard about the power outage within Delta that caused them to be out for quite a while. So this is what a lot of organizations are at. They have very manual methods within managing their data centers, and so the question becomes, well, what's the impact of this? What is the challenge if you haven't really automated this layer? And what you'll find is, without some type of application at the physical infrastructure layer, you can't answer a lot of questions, such as, here are just a few, right? What virtuals will be affected during the migration? You're going to do a migration. What particular virtuals and ultimately what applications are going to be affected when we do this migration? You can't just tell the business owners, oh, all the applications are going to be offline. You're going to have to figure out which ones are affected and figure out a way to migrate those virtuals. Are any applications at risk of failure due to lack of redundancy? Do all of the systems within, well, you couldn't even say all the systems, do all the priority one applications, are all their subsystems within the data center, do they have redundant power? Do they have redundant networking? Is everything redundant under our tier one applications? Are we paying service contracts for hardware we don't have? Happens all the time, sorry. And we find people are paying contracts on hardware which has already been decommissioned. We also find a lot of customers who have hardware which has come in and it has not been deployed. They have servers or racks which are sitting in the back dock and sit there for months because the organization was not aware that they had actually arrived. Another question, how much does it cost for us to deliver this service? A very basic one, and one that's coming up quite often. Nowadays, the business owners have options of running their applications out on AWS, and so they know exactly on an hourly basis, at least they can estimate, on an hourly basis, how much it's going to cost them to run an application. They're now turning to an organization and saying, well, how much does it cost for us to deliver that same level of resources, that same level of compute capacity? So without an application at the physical layer, you really don't know what it is costing you from a resource perspective or from the time personnel spend on the given different physical infrastructure that supports the different applications. Do we have enough physical capacity? What are the trends? Are we going to have enough capacity 30 days out, 60 days out, 90 days out? And that could literally be power capacity. It could be space. In some organizations with older buildings, it could be weight. So ultimately, do you have enough physical capacity? And then you get into reconciling issues. Is our performance issue due to power? Is our performance issue or an incident we're having, and it could be a repeating incident, being caused by anything happening physically in the data center? So this is where DSIM comes in. This is where data center infrastructure management comes out. It's taking that lower layer, which is often managed via spreadsheets and manual methods, and automating it using software like Nlight to manage it. So you're managing the resources, the power, the environmental elements, the resource visualization that you see all the different resources and their utilization and their capacity. Multi-tenancy management and workflow management. These are all elements, and I've taken this list directly out of the Gartner DSIM Magic Quadrant. But these are all elements that are necessary in order to effectively automate and manage this bottom layer underneath the other ITOM layers. And so with ServiceNow specifically, connecting ServiceNow, CMD, and change management with DSIM enables you to do things that you couldn't before, right? It allows you to see what changes are occurring in the data center. So in the example here, the sample we're using, somebody makes a change request to put in more equipment. The request then goes through a specification. It gets approved. At that point, it's punched out. to the data center side into Inlight, into data center infrastructure management, where it can then, our solution can then reserve the resources. We get the hardware. It then creates a work order specifically for individuals where those particular resources, whether it's racks and servers, where those particular assets go in the data center, what networking they tie into, what power they're tying into, and it takes them through a punch list of all the work that needs to be performed. And as each of those items is recorded, that information is then seamlessly fed back to ServiceNow. Why is this important? You're capturing information about interdependencies between different resources and assets, so you're feeding this information into the CMDB so it's more accurate. You know exactly where the assets are. You know what systems those assets are dependent on and vice versa. So again, you get a more complete view of what's occurring in the data center, but you're also getting a more complete view of what's occurring in the data center. You're not blind to who's doing what. Are they doing it according to the policies we've laid out? You want repeatability within the data center. So you know who did what steps were taken. You're learning how much time it's taking to do these steps, what interdependencies exist, and how you can improve. And by taking all of this together, you begin to get an idea of how much does it cost, again, to deliver the service that is the service provided by the data center. Again, using manual methods, you cannot capture this information easily. You need some sort of automated mechanisms to feed that information from the DSIM and the data center into ServiceNow. So again, the benefits here are really that by integrating Inlight and its data center service management capabilities into ServiceNow, you're really getting better measurement, right? You're improving the measurement of your processes, which ultimately also gives you a better idea of how much it costs you. You're increasing the accuracy of your SLA and can prove your SLAs to the business side of your organization. You're bolstering your CMDB, right? You're improving your data federation by getting more up-to-the-minute information, by having more rich information on those assets and the interdependencies between assets, which ultimately increases the efficiency of anyone who's dependent on that information, and you ultimately reduce the time it takes to perform audits. And lastly, you're improving process flows and visibility. You're getting greater control of the changes occurring in the data center. You can enforce best processes and policies. One of our customers has 17 data centers worldwide, and one of the things that was key to them, and they tie into ServiceNow, was the ability to tell individuals across the world how they want assets deployed and how they want them wired up to the network and to power. So it's a means of making sure people are doing things in a consistent way with the policies of the organization. So, and again, this improves incident resolution because the information people are depending on is accurate, and you can actually raise proactive incident ticket creation where, let's say, there's a power spike or any type of issue at the data center. Not only can it kick off a workflow for data center personnel to go find out what the issue is, but they can kick off an incident within ServiceNow to kick off a ticket so that the ITSM system now has full visibility on the issues that are occurring in the data center. If you see enough of them occurring, maybe you can head off a catastrophic issue before it happens. So I'm sort of running out of time. I see we're getting quite a few questions, so I'll go over this pretty quick. Again, the key here is when you integrate these two systems, what's going on down at the data center level, which Inlight manages, and tie that into ServiceNow, you're getting the ability to view and track all the steps and all the actions that are occurring in the data center. And if there's one thing ITIL is all about is what are the processes occurring and how do we repeat them, measure them, and then improve them. You also get visibility into resources that are being consumed, energy, space, time, people. You're tightening up the processes across multiple departments. Any department that's dependent on the data center, whether it's finance, wants to know about assets or warranties, or it's operations, wants to know if there are any power issues or anything that's going on inside the data center. This helps provide better integration amongst the different groups. And ultimately, Inlight is helping provide complete measurement from the application all the way down to the concrete, not just the logical and the virtual, but the physical also. And as I was mentioning before, by doing so, you're really improving ITIL best practices across the entire organization. You're not leaving the data center out. So in summary, often ITSM processes often lack integration and visibility into data center operations. And in large part, many organizations have just let data centers off to the side and just have run them separately. And as a result, many of those organizations are just using spreadsheets to manage them. But many organizations are starting to realize you have these data centers which house literally tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars worth of assets, and you want to manage them with the same rigor and the same discipline that you get in ITSM. So because of this, it's created inconsistencies in ITSM data, and it breaks down the process flows, and it makes it very difficult to make sure you're delivering SLAs, and make sure you understand what are the costs of delivering those SLAs. So the integration between ServiceNow and Inlight is actually easy to do because we have a sort of a message-based architecture within the solution, and we provide pre-built connectors that allow you to integrate into ServiceNow, and ultimately with the goal of improving the accuracy and the efficiency of organizations as they deliver the SLAs around their data center. So we have a variety of different assets here. We're running out of time. I see we've got less than 3 minutes left. But if you, again, if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them. I see we have had some questions come in. We've also got some additional assets you can go view out on our website if you're interested. And you can also see we have you can contact us via the Inlight blog or the Inlight, or you can email us at info@inlight.com. So I'm now going to turn to the questions. So the first question we have is from Ravi, which is, what mechanisms do you support for integrating with ServiceNow? I sort of hit on it quickly there at the end. The question came in before I got to that slide. So Inlight provides a message-based architecture. In fact, we communicate through hardened APIs. Our own application uses those same APIs. So all of our application is exposed by these APIs. And so we use a message-based architecture to communicate to any other systems. We also provide pre-built connectors. So we have pre-built connectors that you don't have to necessarily create your own connector, but if you had your own homegrown application, we can connect through it, RESTful APIs. But in this case with ServiceNow, we have pre-built connectors to their CMDB and to their change management that allows you to basically map the different fields you want to connect to and synchronize in both directions. So I hope that answered the question, Ravi. The next question is, how is Inlight priced? Inlight is priced by a number of racks that are being used within a data center. So basically, we feel that's the best way to make sure that the value being provided of the solution maps to the price that's being charged. And then the next question is from Gary, which is, doesn't the ServiceNow CMDB have all the information that's in Inlight? No, it actually doesn't. There's actually quite a bit of information which is being captured down inside Inlight that isn't inside typically ServiceNow. We capture first of all, we capture a very rich set of information about the assets themselves, but we also have all the interdependencies of those assets, how they relate to one another, what systems they're dependent on. We also have real-time information such as power information, temperatures within the data center. So we're capturing a lot more rich set of information that we can federate into the ServiceNow CMDB than is typically just found in the ServiceNow CMDB. And this will be the last question because I see it's 9:30. This question is from Nick. How does Inlight workflow work with ServiceNow workflows? Quite a few works in there. How does Inlight workflow work with ServiceNow workflows? I sort of mentioned it earlier in that one particular slide. We integrate through these pre-built connectors, and really you just want to define what the integration points are. So we would work with an organization and say, when there's a change request, do you want that specifically involves the data center where you're putting in new racks, new servers? That would be a good example where you'd want a touch point where it punches out that request to Nlight. At that point, we would have a workflow of our own inside Nlight that then would deal with that add request. So you would have the change request that's adding, for instance, a rack with servers. You then have a punch list of things that need to occur to do that, to reserve the resources, to then indicate you receive the different assets, then you've put the assets in the proper place, you've wired them up, and then you complete that work order, and that information is then sent back. But again, the key is finding out which particular workflows within ServiceNow you want to be communicating over into the data center and vice versa, and where those key touch points are. So I hope that answered the question. Again, we've run out of time. We have a variety of other questions that came in. I'm sorry we didn't get to them. We will get back to you offline. We are over the time we scheduled here a little bit. But again, we want to thank you for spending time with us. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at info@nlight.com. Thanks. Look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.